Good afternoon, or good morning, depending upon where you are in the world. My name is Dr. Richard Kaul, and I'd like to thank you for watching my video internet show. Today I'm going to be reading some of the pieces, or a piece, that I wrote over the last 3 years. I have to admit the last 3 years have been a very productive writing period for me. And the piece that I'm going to read today, it's a slightly political piece, which I'm sure, as some of the viewers might know, I've been writing about particularly the political scene in New Jersey. And the title of the piece is The Emperor's New Clothes. And it's a very short essay that I wrote essentially about Mr. Chris Christie, who is currently campaigning to obtain the Republican nomination in the United States. And it specifically, the piece relates to what is referred to as the Bridgegate scandal. And it was a fiasco in New Jersey in which Mr. Christie ordered 3 of his underlings to close 3 lanes into the busiest bridge in the world. And you may ask yourself why. And the answer is simply, and quite unbelievably, because the mayor of a town, small town, in New Jersey, called Fort Lee, refused to endorse Mr. Christie for his political re-election campaign. So he was found out, and it was found out, and it was widely reported in the press. So Mr. Christie went on to national media, trying to distance himself from the scandal, and in my opinion, was not very convincing. So I wrote this piece, and it's The Emperor's New Clothes. At last, there was the lone voice of truth, hollowing out of the mouth of the mayor of Fort Lee, Mark Sokolich, who would not let... Right. The piece is entitled The Emperor's New Clothes. At last, there was the lone voice of truth, hollowing out of the mouth of the mayor of Fort Lee, Mark Sokolich, who would not let Mr. Christie trample his way to political stardom on the back of Fort Lee residents. The Bridgegate scandal erupted, and both state and federal investigations have commenced, only to be followed almost immediately by Dawn Zimmer, the mayor of Hoboken, a small New Jersey town, who made substantial claims that her requests for Sandy aid relief from the governor were made contingent on her approval of a commercial/residential development owned by a Christie ally, whose legal representation, David Sampson, was also another Christie crony. As if not to make things worse, the British press reported a story in the Daily Mail online which describes the battle of a Hunterdon County, New Jersey ex-prosecutor named Bennett Barlin, B-A-R-L-Y-N, who had been fired because he was prosecuting a criminal case against a Deborah Trout, another Christie ally and political supporter. Bennett had filed a lawsuit to gain access to the legal records which would prove that his firing and the dismissal of the case were political revenge in exactly the same manner as executed against the mayor of Fort Lee, Mark Sokolich, which then led on to the Bridgegate investigation and scandal. The trouble just seems to keep on coming, much like the never-ending swells of Hurricane Sandy, which provided Mr. Christie the perfect opportunity to salvage his sinking political career, but which a Hoboken twist of fate will now most likely wreck. A political career can be beautifully cruel, with promises of unimagined power and the perils of complete annihilation. Why would anyone choose a career in this tainted pursuit that, unlike medicine or law, requires no formal education, training, or examination process? Even more shocking when you think that even the driver of a car needs to pass a written and practical test. Christie gave his inauguration speech on January the 21st, 2014 in Trenton, New Jersey. And it was, I must admit, a rather sad sight to watch. His advisors most likely instructed him not to venture anywhere near the shark-infested waters of any of the scandal swirling around him, but instead directed him to talk about his lofty socioeconomic goals, and a thinly disguised suggestion that he would run for the 2016 presidency. And this is despite the fact that his state, New Jersey, is now in one of the worst economic positions it has been for 2 decades, with increased unemployment, inner city poverty on the rise, and a warlike homicide rate in both Newark and Camden, 2 of the most violent cities in America. Despite the fact that none of the crowd verbalized the obvious, which is that Christie is now politically naked, as his donors and Republican friends are subtly heading for the hills. And it is clear to this writer that his political aspirations for the White House are over. If he is to have any chance of holding on to any aspects of the New Jersey governor's position, then he must devote his time to correcting his mistakes in this state and not gallivanting around the US, courting favor with would-be donors, which would only confirm to New Jersey that he never really cared about its constituents. And logic would therefore argue that he would display the same disdain for the American people, to whom he has an even weaker connection. Christie has played himself into his own Machiavellian corner, for which he can blame only himself and not any of his minions. A fascinating observation will be what he learns, if anything, from this experience. But what I think is probably even more relevant would be how he uses that knowledge, if at all, to unconditionally help others. Mr. Christie's conduct, as far back as public records indicate, was about political self-aggrandizement for the acquisition of power and not the betterment of humanity. He studied political science, not because he wanted to join the Peace Corps or help Mother Teresa work out a political solution to address the epidemic of hunger in Calcutta. No, Mr. Christie had it in his head from the time he was 14 that he wanted to be the president, whether it was for his class, university, state, or country, and it was to this end, with all the backroom machinations, that he immersed himself. The greatest leaders in history have generally tried to avoid political office because of their realizations early on that the path to the front door of this office is littered with sold souls, while the back door is covered in the blood of broken hearts. Some men Abraham Lincoln, being the most obvious example, brought a character to the office that gave it a legitimacy that others destroyed. The White House can be a force for good or bad, and what determines this is solely the character of the man who holds the presidency. Christie is politically naked and needs to find a new philosophical tailor who will hopefully guide him on a path to find his own inner truth and the real reason he chose to enter politics, which I would suspect relates to some childhood experience of bullying and neglect. Whatever the developmental block happens to be, it should not be given any opportunity to rear its adolescent head on any global geopolitical stage, as the world already has enough Kim Jong-ils, and America still has the high moral ground. It would indeed be a sad day for the world if this position were forfeited due to the arrogance and political vanity of a nude from New Jersey. Thank you.